And you guys are live.
Morning, everyone, and welcome to today's East Hampton Village Board meeting. Today is December 17th at 11 a.m. If we could get a pledge, Chief Terza.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to ask everyone remain standing and observe a moment of silence for Mrs. Sheila Cullum and Mrs. Linda Miller, the mothers of two of our beloved and longtime village employees who we've lost in the last few days. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Very nicely done. All right, so we're going to start off with a roll call. June, board members.
That helps. Mayor Larson,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Chris Minardi.
I'm here. Good morning.
Hi. Trustee Arthur Graham.
I'm here, thank you.
You're welcome. Trustee Rose Brown.
Sorry, here.
That's okay. That's okay. Trustee Sandra Melendez.
Present.
Thank you. Administrator Marco Belladron.
Here.
Thank you. Village Attorney Vincent Messina.
Present.
Thank you.
All right. I just have a couple of announcements. One, I'm going to actually let Drew, our beach manager, take it from here about an announcement we have. Go ahead, Drew.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'd like to make an announcement about the Polar Bear Plunge at Main Beach on January 1st. It is hosted by the East Hampton Hurricane Swim Team, and it's lifeguarded by East Hampton Volunteer Ocean Rescue. The event has registration beginning at 11:30 a.m. It's a $35 donation. There's also a 50-50 raffle, apparel for sale, and a prize for the best costume. All proceeds will go to the East Hampton Food Pantry. For further information, you can call them at 631-324-2300.
Great, thanks, Drew.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor.
I'll be down there to start it. They asked me to start the event, but I'm not going in. So I know Mayor Rickenback used to go in, but I just can't do that. It's
Well, you
just
can wear a bathing suit.
too cold, too cold.
Right.
So the other announcement I have, and this is exciting news, we have Hampton Chutney opened this morning up at the old Mary's Marvelous right on Newtown Lane. Stopped in there this morning, bought some coffee. It was, the place looks great. Congratulations to Isabel and Gary. I know Chris was there with his kids and his wife, and it's going to be a great spot for everyone to enjoy.
That was great. Vera was the first one in the door. She was so excited.
First
And they have
customer.
coffee in the morning. They have coffee in the morning. They were open at 7 o'clock. So they're trying to provide that service that Mary's left off, was some early morning coffee in that area. So so it was great.
Yeah, it was
I'll have
quite,
lunch there today as well.
quite crowded when I got there, around 7:30 or so. It was busy. So, all right, I think that's the only announcements I have. So Marcos, could you introduce our next guest?
Hi.
Oh, Hugh, I'm sorry. You're not on the list. You didn't
I'm
make the
not?
cut. So,
Okay, I'll leave then.
no, go right ahead, Hugh. Go ahead.
Okay, well, what I wanted to talk about is that since this is the Christmas season and the holiday season, many people attend houses of worship. So what I wanted to do today is just give a little quick history of each place. The latest place to be formed was the Jewish Center of the Hamptons. They were formed in 1959 through the efforts of Jacob Kaplan and Evan Frankel and Bernie Zeldin and Irv Markowitz. And the building where they have now was built in the 1960s, but you know where they met first? They met in the Session House of the East Hampton Presbyterian Church, thanks to the efforts of Will Strong. Then, of course, we have the Methodist Church. The Methodists were not welcome in East Hampton, so they built a church in Amagansett in 1848. It was at the corner of Windmill Lane and Montauk Highway. By 1899, they sold that building and then built the present Methodist Church. The Catholic Church was built in 1894. They laid the cornerstone for that on what was called Sag Harbor Turnpike. Now, of course, it's Buell Lane or Route 114. The Episcopal Church was first built in 1858. It was a little wooden chapel. It stood between the present church and Home Sweet Home. They enlarged it in 1883, and then in 1910, they built the current stone church. And then the Presbyterian Church was in like 4 different places, well, 4 different churches. In 1653, there was one built, we think, in front of Home Sweet Home. In 1717, they built a church right next to Guildhall. They didn't like that church, so in 1860, they built another church on the site of the present church. And then in 1960, they changed that church to make it look like today. And I just remembered there's another house of worship in the village, and it's the Orthodox Jewish Center. And I'm afraid I don't know when that began. Does any of the board members know when that first opened? If not, I'll report next time. Okay.
Thanks, Hugh. Marcos?
Sure, Frank, you're on the call? Because I think, Frank, can you let us know how long you've been auditing the books?
I've been the partner in charge 5 years.
There you go.
I believe before that was John Lundy.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Who unfortunately passed away 5 years ago. Well, thank you, Marcos. My name is Frank Sluter. I'm one of the audit partners on the village's audit, and I'm here to report the results of our audit. The village has received a unqualified or a clean opinion on their financial statements. What that really means is that based on our audit procedures, the financial statements present fairly the village's results of their operations, their cash flows, their financial position. Also this year, as part of our audit procedures, we looked at the internal controls over the financial reporting and on compliance with laws and regulations. We performed that audit in accordance with audit standards as issued by the United States Comptroller General's Office. Those procedures, during our procedures, we did not detect any type of material misstatement, material weaknesses on internal controls or on compliance. So congratulations to all on that. As part of our audit, we come in there, we disrupt people. Sometimes we apologize to Dominique. Most of all, we also want to thank the staff. The staff is always forthcoming when we ask stuff. And we understand that you still have a job, and your job is not to cater to us while we're there. But the staff was always forthcoming. No one ever said no to us for any of the information. So we want to thank them for that, because it does allow us then to get our reports out timely. So I want to thank them. I also think that, the positive reports, the unqualified opinion, you have no material weaknesses or any type of deficiency in the controls over the financial reporting. I think it shows the dedication to those who are charged with the governance over the finances of the village. Questions were asked of us, how you could improve, what could you change, what would make it better. So I think that positive attitude by the staff goes a long way from a financial reporting standpoint. So I want to thank them for that. We'll go over some budgetary highlights. Total revenues were 27 million this year, or for July 31st, rather. That exceeded budgetary amounts in a few areas. Licensing permits by $655,000. You had a very good year. You instituted a few for parking. I did note that that is actually higher than the last 2 years' actual revenues. So I went back to 19 just to see, because everybody understood that last year was a little unusual with COVID, but no, it actually exceeded 2019 and 2020's revenues. So very good with that. State and local aid, mortgage recording taxes, again, that I went back to 2019, and those revenues, about 534,000, exceeded 19 and 20. What does the future hold on that? As long as rates, I guess, stay the way they are, hopefully those revenues will continue. You'll also notice when you look at the financials, you'll see that the caption use of money went up by almost $1 million. That is true that went up by $1 million, but that $1 million, those revenues are not, the village is not able to utilize those dollars. That actually has to do with the length of service awards program for the fire department on the investments. So the village cannot use those dollars for anything other than the investments in the LoSAP. So it does look like it's very high, but please understand, you can't use those dollars, unfortunately, for normal village business. From an expenditure standpoint, total expenditures were under budgeted by almost $525,000 this year. Every expense category contributed to that area, to that positive reduction: public safety, transportation, and employee benefits. So no one item was overly reduced, but amongst all the captions down. So that was also very nice. The village continues with their capital projects. This year was almost $2.5 million in expenditures. The Dominique workshop was $200,000. Fire and safety was $225,000. Street paving was just under $900,000. And then the town ponds was $730,000 for the current year. You continue to keep paying down your debt. You made principal payments for the fiscal year of $955,000, which now you have outstanding long-term debt of $3.5 million. And that's on the budgetary process. On the statement of financial position, and what that is that the village finances not based on a cash basis, but based on a full accrual. You'll note that there are certain items in there that have significant liabilities that you have no control over. First one is the pension obligations by New York State. Those dollars, those calculations are all performed by the state controller's office. The village is then required to take their incremental share and report those in their financial statements. So you have that, and then you have your healthcare liability. This year, it's $23 million. But remember, that's a liability that you're not allowed to pre-fund in New York State. You're precluded from it. So you're going to continue to make your payments as you've always done, as the bills come through or as people retire, and you continue to make the healthcare payments. That's more of a pay-as-you-go, and that's part of your budgetary process. Again, you're not allowed to pre-fund it, nor can you use reserves to fund that. Please understand. That again, that's also outside of your control when it comes to the liability. You're at the mercy of insurance premiums and mortality rates. At the end of the year, the balance sheet showed, the governmental balance sheet showed unassigned fund balance, or dollars available for future use for the village of almost $7.6 million. And that's roughly 33% of the expenditures for the year. So you have about 1/3 of expenditures for the year in reserves should any, like the mortgage recording tax income go down, should license and permit income go down, you at least have that money to hedge against it. But also don't forget that in the future, you still have roughly $3.5 million of compensated absences that are due. And those are going to come due over the ensuing years. Those funds can be utilized to either reserve for that and or pay for those retirees when it comes to fruition. So, you may think that 7.6 million sounds like a lot, but with a $3.5 million potential liability over the few years, I don't believe that's overfunding at all. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I just wanted to add a couple of things, Frank, and I know you're aware of this, but I just wanted to remind the public when we first took office, we had a position that the village administrator was our treasurer and our clerk, all wrapped in one person. And that person resigned and kind of left us short 3 positions. So we then created separate positions for those titles. And Dominique stepped up. She was the deputy at the time, and she stepped up. And she's just done an outstanding job. She's very thorough and has just done a terrific job. And I just wanted to thank her for doing that. And she's on this every day. So it's just amazing to watch. So is there a possibility you can compare, how we're doing today as opposed to the last few years?
Sure. It's actually a conversation. At first, I want to say I agree with you. Dominique seems like she really likes her job. She's always, even when we show up, she smiles. Most people don't smile when the auditors show up. I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to be, so we do like that. And because she seems very confident in what she's doing and takes ownership of anything we request. From a fiscal standpoint, and I noticed it even with Marcos in a conversation we had, you seem to take the budgetary process very seriously. It's like, it's not always done that way. A lot of budgets are always prepared, and not saying you've done this in the past, but budgets we look at last year, we look at this year and just put something together. But it seems like in discussions that we've had with the budgetary process that you're really trying to ensure that you stay within line of the budget, especially on the expenditure side. The revenue side is always a little difficult because mortgage recording taxes, items like that are definitely outside of your power. You're at and that you get from the state. We did notice the parking fees based on that new parking fee that you have on a monthly basis brought in almost $350,000 this year.
Wow, that's great.
It was, and it didn't seem like there was too much pushback because that was the first question we asked. Because when we see items go up, we were required as part of our audit procedures to just ask the staff.
Right. Well, that's great, Frank. It's all good news, and of course, with Marcos and Dominique, they're a great team, and I couldn't be happier with this report and their service to the village. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Everybody have a happy holiday.
Thanks,
you.
Dominique.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
All right, next up, Dr. Gobler, who's going to talk to us about the benefits of our sewer system that we're working towards. Hi, Doctor.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, board members and everyone else listening. Thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to speak. I have prepared some slides, so I'll cue those up. And if people have questions as I move along, you're welcome to ask those questions as I go, or we can talk about things in the end, which will be really important as well. Your feedback is, study can't proceed without your feedback, frankly. So, okay. So, I'm going to be talking about, part of it is about water quality in general and current conditions. Part of it is about sewering scenarios and how that can change current conditions. For those of you who don't know me, just as a quick way of introduction, I'm a professor at Stony Brook University, endowed chair of coastal conservation ecology. I'm also the director of the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. Actually began doing research on East End water bodies in 1992, believe it or not, when I started my graduate studies. And well, I've been doing a lot of work around the world since then. So well, I'm going to start with just a very basic concept, and that is the concept of the watershed, and the idea that everything that's going on in the village everywhere affects our water resources. And that's because all of the water that hits land, a good fraction of that recharges into the groundwater. And that becomes our drinking water. And there's no way around that. And even though if we say we have county water, some people call it city water, that water is still coming from within the village. And then in addition, whatever we don't take out of the ground for drinking discharges into surface waters and then changes and can affect the character of our surface waters. And we know that as the population of Suffolk County and East Hampton and the East End in general has grown through the years, it's affected the quality of our groundwater. So this is just giving the overarching view of Suffolk County, but the view is quite similar on the South Fork as well. And the idea being that as population grows, you see the concentrations of nitrogen in the groundwater grow. And when you get to a level this high, as it turns out, there's only really 5% of the country with higher concentrations than this. So we really are in a unique situation. And as you're probably aware, that has led to all sorts of what we call water quality impairments. And this is a map I generated just back in October, and it's encompassing everything we observe from May of 2021 to September of 2021. And so you can see there's water quality impairments all over the island. The blue are areas of low oxygen, and every other, the dark blue that is, such as these. Everything else is what we call a harmful algal bloom in freshwater and marine water bodies. And you can see there's no shortage of these locations. They're all over and even quite concentrated on the South Fork. Just to highlight a couple of these very quickly, one of the ones we worry about the most are freshwater cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, because they make these toxins that can be poisonous to humans. Microcystin and anatoxin A, for example, when they were first identified by scientists in the 20th century, the first names for these two compounds was fast death factor and very fast death factor because of the effects they can have on mammals. And they've been traced to cancer in people who drink water with this. They've been responsible for animal deaths. You can see here the study that came out of Africa, killing over 300 elephants from consuming water with these toxins. And we've even had, well, the CDC has declared that these blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, were responsible for hundreds of dog deaths in the United States. And as you're probably aware, dog died on Georgia Pond several years ago from blue-green algae. So it's a serious concern for human health and our pets. And a final consequence of the increasing nitrogen, they create these algal blooms, which I've already highlighted, but when those blooms degrade, that can pull oxygen out of the water. And the DEC worries about oxygen because of the effects it can have on aquatic life. So zooming into the village, here you can see the village boundaries, and specifically you can see the two most prominent water bodies in the village are both Hook Pond and Georgia Pond, with Hook Pond, as you can see, being directly within the zone of Main Street and Georgia Pond a little bit further out. Although if you look at watersheds, what's interesting is that there is the general flow of water from the east towards Georgia Pond as well. So there is actually an influence of the downtown village area on Georgia Pond, and also obviously on Hook Pond. Just some quick background on these two water bodies, so we can understand why we'd want to potentially sewer these regions. Prior monitoring that I've done of Hook Pond has shown that it does experience these blue-green algae blooms that, again, can be dangerous to human health and pet health. These, as you can see here, the levels of cyanobacteria, this is by measuring the pigment, This is the threshold at which the DEC would close the water body. You can see that was exceeded in a prior year. And moreover, during that year, we detected 3 different species of these blue-green algae in Hook Pond. And when they're there, essentially what that means is that, there's an old saying in microbial ecology. And the saying is, everything is everywhere and the environment selects. And so what that means is that we have the blue-green algae in Hook Pond. If you create the conditions that promote these events, which is excessive amount of nitrogen and phosphorus, they'll get more intense. In addition to the blue-green algae blooms, we've also seen periods of extremely low oxygen in Hook Pond. All aquatic life outside of bacteria need dissolved oxygen in order to survive. And you can see we had what we call an anoxic event at one point, and multiple observations of oxygen below the DEC standard of 4.8 per liter. There are similar water quality impairments for neighboring Georgia Pond. I have lots and lots of data on that. I won't go through it all, but through the years in Georgia Pond, we've seen blooms of macrophytes, as you can see here, that can coat almost the entire surface waters of the pond in midsummer. And when these go away, they can be succeeded by these blue-green algae blooms that we've described before. It can be extremely intense, in some cases more than 20 times the closure limit by the DEC, and that's led to the closure of the pond. You can see here that they, sometimes these things, the overgrowth of the macrophytes and the blue-green algae co-occur. And we've also had unfortunate instances in Georgia Pond of low oxygen that can lead to fish kills and other deaths of aquatic life. So with that as background, for the current study, the overall arching objectives are shown here. And the idea is that essentially put together the current state of Hook Pond. Although I'll say that this is what I originally had proposed. I'm expanding this to Georgia Pond because recognizing that there actually is an impact of the village to Georgia Pond. And then to develop a model that quantifies the rate at which nitrogen and phosphorus goes from the village into these water bodies. And then once we have those models built out, what we can do is then essentially determine how changes in land use will affect the water bodies and the delivery of nitrogen and phosphorus to those water bodies. And so those are the next steps, is to come up with different scenarios to understand how sewering different parts of the region of the village will affect nitrogen and phosphorus loading rates. We can also consider how just upgrading septic tanks will affect nitrogen and phosphorus loading rates. That's because sewering the entire village is not realistic, but a combination of sewering some regions and upgrading septic systems in other regions is realistic. We're also going to be doing essentially what we call a partial scale analysis and sort of coming up with an effect. What's the cost effectiveness of sewering versus upgrading based on where every single parcel is located? And then finally to project out how that might affect. So here's just sort of an overview of what the model looks like. It's actually a little bit more detailed than this, but these are the different sources of nitrogen we consider: the atmosphere, fertilizer from agriculture, fertilizer from homes, wastewater. We also, for this study, considered pets and of course golf as well. And I'll go through that for each of the water bodies. So to do this, we have to gather a lot of detailed information about the way that nitrogen and phosphorus travel through the watershed. Now, in good news, there's been a lot of advances in this, specifically on Long Island and specifically on Eastern Long Island during the past decade. And I've been fortunate enough to work with multiple governmental and non-governmental organizations and universities, including EPA, USGS, Cornell University, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Suffolk County Department of Health Services, where we've created a committee and sort of come up with a consensus on how does nitrogen loading to land, how is that affected by different land use practices? And what we came to is what we call a scientific consensus. So a consensus, so the model I'm presenting you here, therefore, is not based on my best guess, but is based on a consensus amongst all of these universities, government organizations, again, from the county all the way up to the EPA and the USGS. So these are the values we're using, but they've been very thoroughly vetted scientifically. And then we also, of course, are gathering lots of local data from publicly available data sets, GIS-based data sets, specifically on every single parcel within the village, and understanding really every square, frankly, every square meter of the village, and understanding how the land is used and who lives where, and how that may be therefore affecting coastal water bodies. So we've actually finished some of these models, and I'm going to show you now our preliminary results. So this is our overarching model for Georgia Pond, which is fairly consistent with what we've done before, that essentially shows that about half of the nitrogen loading is coming from on-site wastewater. And then if for those people who like pie charts better, here's just another way of looking at that. And again, that number of 50% is consistent with what we found before for Georgia Pond. Now, as it turns out, if we don't look at Georgia Pond as a whole, but just the part of Georgia Pond that's affected by the village, it turns out that wastewater becomes a little bit less important, and fertilizer becomes a little bit more important. And again, if you look at, so that's for Georgia Pond. If we move to Hook Pond, what we see is that most of the nitrogen is coming from wastewater again, except this number goes way up from 50% to now more than 62%. So that's really good in that, upgrading wastewater, therefore, is likely to have a very large and positive effect on Hook Pond. Of course, we also know that the golf course becomes part of the story for the Hook Pond watershed. And there's a little bit more agriculture within that watershed as well. And then finally, on the wastewater front, when it comes to Hook Pond and you consider just the contribution to the village, the scenario gets even better. And that almost 70% of the nitrogen that's going into Hook Pond is coming from on-site wastewater. And the reason this is good news is that this means that addressing wastewater can have a significant benefit for Hook Pond and should work towards reversing some of those impairments that I mentioned before, the blue-green algae and the low oxygen conditions. Again, if you like pie charts, here's an example of what that looks like. Biggest piece of the pie being from the on-site septic systems. And I should, I'm going kind of fast here because I know your time is important. But I do just want to make one quick point about these on-site septic systems. I should have had I was remiss of me to not have a diagram on them. So you're just going to have to hear me describe that. For those of you who don't know, what essentially is happening currently in the village is that every single parcel has either a cesspool, which is a large ring with a bunch of holes in it, or a septic tank attached to a cesspool, which is a concrete block or concrete tank, then going to a series of leaching rings with holes in them. But the fact of the matter is, either of these systems removes almost zero nitrogen. And what that means is what they're designed to do is take the wastewater from a home, put it into these leaching rings, and then it seeps directly into our groundwater. And again, as a reminder, that groundwater is what we're drinking and is also what's going into these surface waters. So again, there is very little treatment of nitrogen. And I should also say, these systems remove almost, well, in many cases, very little of the other sorts of contaminants like personal care products, pharmaceuticals, and drugs that we also don't want getting into our drinking water supply and our surface waters as well. So that's why sewering is so important. And so the next part of the study here is trying to understand, if we do sewer the downtown area and other regions, what would the effects be? So in the past, a consulting firm had considered a few different sewering scenarios. I'm not going to go through these because these are not currently being considered. But you can see here the different regions that within the village that were being considered. Currently, as a what we would call a straw man proposal, we've put together 5 scenarios. But I welcome feedback on refining these scenarios. But the scenarios that I'm going to show them in a map right now, but these are really based on sort of doing things firstly one region at a time and thinking about areas that make the most sense. Again, you don't necessarily want to be running sewer lines through the entire village. So the question is what makes the most sense? So the scenarios that we've considered is doing Main Street only, Main Street plus North Main Street, these 2 regions plus fanning out to the middle school and elementary school, all of these regions, and then further fanning out to the high school. And then lastly, all of these scenarios plus upgrading the septic systems. And just to show you a map of how this would look, these are the different scenarios that I've just mentioned. And again, these can be refined in any way that people believe would be desirable. But again, there's the sewering of Main Street, North Main Street, the elementary school and middle school, and then going up to the high school. And of course, as this is done, regions within that zone, it's easy enough to capture the homes that are closest to the sewer lines that are being run. Again, these can be refined in whatever way we think they would make sense. But I just want to show you here just a hypothetical scenario. If you ran those 4, and we have a draft of it already. If you sewer those regions and you upgrade the septic systems, what are the benefits to the water bodies? And you can see they are substantial, and that you're looking at a reduction in the nitrogen loading to Hook Pond of more than 50%, and a very large chunk for Georgica Pond. And then if you consider what fraction of load the village is responsible for Hook Pond, that number gets up even higher. So this is a very effective way of addressing the nitrogen loading that's going to these water bodies, as well as improving the water quality within these water bodies. And finally, also improving the quality of drinking water within the village. And that is to say that, under the current scenario, the drinking water supply is being affected by those on-site septic systems. So, it's important to recognize there's that benefit both to water quality, surface water quality, but also drinking water as well. So the next steps for this study is to agree upon and finalize these different sewing scenarios. And then we can finalize the nitrogen load reductions. We're also going to consider phosphorus. Although I'll just mention one thing about phosphorus is that while nitrogen travels freely out of a septic tank and right into water bodies and towards drinking water wells, phosphorus acts quite differently in that a lot of the phosphorus actually gets bound up in the sandy sediments on the South Fork and does not travel and is not as mobile as nitrogen. So we expect a smaller reduction from the sewering and septic upgrades, but we can and will do that as well. And then finally will be to finalize what we expect the improvements to be within Hook Pond and Georgica Pond with regards to water quality. So that is marks the end of my presentation. And with that, I would welcome any questions or comments that anyone has.
I think that study really points out the benefits of installing this sewer system even beyond what we believed before you did the study. So that's great news.
Dr. Goller, do you have a concept of the cost of these different scenarios, or is that outside your expertise?
It's a little outside of my expertise. Although I do think we could probably take a first order approximation. There are sort of, there's 2 costs. There's building the plant, and then so if we had and I think there are estimates for that already. If we knew the cost of building the plant, there are then estimates of, for each foot of sewer line, how much additional cost that is. So I would need to consult with a couple of people, but I think we could make broad estimates of that.
Right.
And
Any other
also,
questions?
in, under your scenario 5, if we were to build out the village core, and then you would consider this putting IAs all over the village or just in the sensitive locations?
So the model that I built out was just essentially upgrading all the homes within the village, but we could modify that. It's really, like I said, it's the village's study. But I do, I don't think that's, given the size of the village, the current availability of funds through CPF, the passage of the infrastructure bill, which I know hasn't received a lot of local attention, but I've read that bill very carefully. And there's 22 subsections on clean water in that bill. And so with the upshot being, at the very least, it's safe to say that there will be funding for upgrading septics, for the life of that bill, which is going to be at least 5 years. And it, may well be there's more funding available. So anyway, we could modify it, but I think upgrading many of the homes in the village is not, and also knowing that there's already regulations. So new construction, you have to do that. Transfer of property, you have to, I believe you have to do that. And I know upgrading homes, you have to as well. So yeah.
I had a question, Dr. Gobler, as far as the IA septic system versus the wastewater, the sewer system. If we decide to do one scenario and then whoever is outside of that scenario would then hook up to the IA. It is correct that there are more pollutants that, are taken out of the water with the wastewater system, and therefore it's much more beneficial for water quality as far as nitrogen and phosphorus and other pollutants.
So the answer on that is partly dependent upon the type of IA system that gets installed. But in general, that is, what you're saying is correct. Again, another hat that I wear at the university is I direct the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology, where actually our first objective is addressing these on-site wastewater systems. And we've developed some systems that remove a lot of, for example, drugs and pharmaceuticals. And at this point, we don't know how well the other IA systems do, but I think it's safe to assume that with sewering, you'll get the probably the maximal amount of removal.
All right. Anybody else have any questions?
And if we decide to go with the scenario that includes the high school, since that's outside of the village, we'd be working with the town on that?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know how far outside of the village is it. I thought it was partly in the village, but I'm wrong in that supposition.
The old, it's partially in the village. Yeah, it's close enough probably where the school
It's adjacent, I think.
just connect without any real difficult.
Yeah. And I will just say another consideration here, of course, is that it should be the case that some of the, well, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that town CPF funds should be available for addressing this scenario. And towards that end, it may even be advantageous to saying that you're going outside of the village, right? Which would just be to say that, look, you're just looking to do what's most efficacious for the water bodies, and and therefore it makes sense that we should get support from the town for this effort. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I was just making the point that I think the high school is outside of our boundary.
okay.
Good point too, for North Main Street, we all know that it's an issue there too, and part of that area is within the town. So it would be great to do, to have some cooperation and coordination with the town on those just outside of the village.
Sure, yeah,
And one last question from me, Dr. Gobler.
sure.
Do you have any idea what the flow rates would be for these different scenarios? Or have you not gotten that deep into it yet?
We could do that. I haven't done that, but that's another thing that we doing that, having that data is quite we could do that for sure. And I should just mention, didn't mention, but I've done similar studies for West Hampton Beach Village, for Southampton Village. Obviously, West Hampton Beach has already moved down the road of actually doing this. And again, just think looping back to the CPF idea, they've had great success in getting support from the town of Southampton for their sewering efforts. And the town has partnered with them, recognizing the town-wide benefit for that. So, and having, this sort of model is the, also allows, for applications of state funds. Oftentimes you need to make the case, what's the benefit going to be? Having the study points to that, but maybe you won't read that.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thanks very much, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. And
Coming on
yeah,
and doing that study for
weekend
us.
and holiday season. Take care.
You too. Thank you. Hey, Joe, do you have any callers? Public comment?
There are no callers on the line right now.
All right, so we're going to move into our motions, resolutions. June?
Okay. Number 1, approve claim vouchers for the month of December.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve warrants as listed, general fund number 22, number 25 and 26, guarantees number 23, and LoSAP number 24.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve budget transfer schedule number 3, reference number 3, dated December 13th, 2021.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve departmental reports.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve minutes from meetings held on July 30th, August 20th, September 17th, October 7th, and 15th of 2021.
So moved.
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve extended service plan annual maintenance agreement with Priority Dispatch, which includes support and upgrades for all annual renewing products and services in the amount of $7,680 for the contract period of 8/31/21 through 8/30/22 as per Chief Tracy's August 5th memo.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Deem surplus and approve sale or disposal of lost and found property as per Chief Tracy's November 18th memo.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
I have to say, I was very surprised at some of the items on that list.
Yeah, we bring in quite a number of things.
A lot of iPhones.
Yeah, too many iPhones. Too many iPhones.
All right, next, June.
Accept Eugene De Pasquale as a new member of the Ambulance Association as per Chief Shard's December 1st email.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve new Ambulance Association officers, Chief Ann Grabowski, Captain Marcia Diaz, Lieutenant Olga Ayera, Treasurer Laura Van Binsbergen, Secretary Barbara Borzak, Assistant Chief Lisa Shard, Assistant Captain Mary Mott, and Second Lieutenant Ian Hoyt.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried, and congratulations to everyone, and thank you for everything you do for us.
Employ James Cameron and Stephen Tringali as per diem paramedics at the hourly rate of $28, effective immediately, and that's as per Chief Tracy's November 24th memo.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Adopt resolution number 92-2021 to amend the village vehicle use policy and drug-free workplace policy to prohibit the use of cannabis by employees when utilizing village vehicles and on village property at any time, including after business hours or work shifts.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Adopt resolution number 23-2021, setting the fee for a catering license at $500 effective January 1st, 2022.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Adopt resolution number 94-2021 to amend the conditions of employment vacation leave.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. I just want to make a comment about that. So the employment agreement that was in place for new employees did not offer any vacation time until after they completed 12 months of service. So what we did is we are now offering 10 days of vacation during your first year. So I think it's very difficult for people to not have any days off, for any type of thing for a whole year. So that's one of the amendments that was made to the contract. Actually, that's the only amendment that we made to the contract.
Adopt resolution number 95-2021 to amend the 2021-22 budget to increase estimated revenue and appropriations in the amount of $163,985.65 received from the East Hampton Town CPF related to the town pond dredging project.
So move.
Move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Mr. Mayor, what's the status of the pump at the pond?
No, it's on order.
Do we have any idea when it's going to arrive?
No,
Or is it in a boat?
No, I
off
mean, we can
Longview?
pull in Dave if you're on, because I know you've been asked several times, but I think the pump was on order. It got delayed. And I think, Dave, you put it in the packet as well, right?
It's the pump, we're still waiting for it to be shipped. The tentative ship date is after the first of the year at this point. The original ship date was October 27th, and that was ordered in first part of July, I believe.
perfect.
National shortage on multiple types of products, so.
Thanks, Dave. Next.
Adopt resolution number 26-2021 to standardize the purchase of trash and recycling receptacles.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Just a little announcement. I should have mentioned it earlier, but Dave had the delivery of all our new recyclable bins that have been put out on Main Street in Newtown. So the village will actually, for the first time in its history, be actually recycling garbage. Amazing. All these years, we had recycle bins that all went in the same place, all went in the same garbage bin. So it's nice to see we're actually going to make a difference. So thank you, Dave, for getting that done. Thank you to the board for approving that purchase. It was a lot of money. And thanks to Sandra for coordinating the new recycle program that'll start immediately. Just wanted to make that note. Thank you. Next.
Adopt resolution number 97-2021 to standardize the purchase of hanging flower basket planters.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve the proposal received from Bistrian Materials, Inc. to provide snow removal service for the 2021-2022 season on an as-needed basis.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Adopt resolution number 98-2021, accepting the retirement of Police Sergeant Richard J. Mamay effective January 5th, 2022.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Congratulations to Rich and his family. Rich has served the village very well and has been, I think, I'm just guessing right now, but probably 37 years that he's been working for the village. And prior to that, he was a Bay Constable. And so thanks, Rich, for everything you've done, and enjoy your retirement.
Accept new fire department members, James Stannis in the company number 2 and David Carangello in company number 6.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Accept status change for Zeb Perinis of fire department company number 1 to active exempt effective November 15th.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Notice to bidders for the Dutch elm disease treatment program and ash borer treatment program, with the bid opening to be held on February 8th, 2022 at 2 p.m. at Village Hall.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Approve the $149,839.86 purchase of 3 2022 Ford F-150 4x4 crew cab trucks off New York State mini bid number 8642, and that's as per Chief Terz's December 13th memo.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. When do we expect the delivery of these vehicles, Mayor?
Hold on one second. Passed and carried. And I just wanted to make a comment about this. This is the replacement of 3 fire chiefs' vehicles. And that's how many fire chiefs we have. So again, this is really bad planning. Here we are spending $150,000, actually more than that, because the next line you'll see is to equip them with lights and siren and all that. So we're spending over $200,000. And when we should be really planning this out so that the vehicles don't all come due at once. So we're going to have to be very diligent about doing that moving forward, so we don't get hit like this for the huge financial impacts. So again, it's what we were left with, what we were stuck with, and what we're dealing with every day. So let's, what was your question, Tiger?
Delivery of the vehicles?
Chief Terzer.
We are looking at in excess of 6 months, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Next, June.
Approve the $53,644.50 purchase of emergency lights, accessories, and vehicle graphics off New York State, Ontario County, contract number 436, 2019, to be installed on the above 3 trucks.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Notice for a public hearing to be held on January 21st, 2022 at 11 a.m. via video conferencing for introductory number 31-2021, a proposed code amendment to Chapter 267, Vehicles and Traffic, to improve a line of sight issue on Race Lane.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Now, this was something that the chief of police brought up a while ago, and somehow it slipped through the cracks for a few months, and now it's back on our agenda. So it's basically the parking lot of M&R Deli, that area there. So Chief, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's a pretty simple move. We're putting in 30-minute parking zone, and it's going to take care of a line of sight issue. We're blocking off a spot which obscures the view of people pulling out of the rear parking area of Sam's and M&R. And then by putting in the 30-minute, it allows the stores that operate during the day to get customers in and out. That ends at dinner time, basically. So the restaurant can then use the very same spots. So a couple of merchants in the area have been asking about that for a while. We wrote it out about 1.5 years ago, and it just fell through the cracks. So this is going to be a good thing to get this in and get those signs up.
Nice job, Chief. Next.
Notice for public hearing to be held on January 21st, 2022 at 11 a.m. via video conferencing for introductory number 32-2021, a proposed code amendment to Chapter 267, Vehicles and Traffic, and that would be in reference to long-term parking permits.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. I just want to make a comment about this as well. So when we changed our parking, we went to the mobile app, the long-term lot, we did away with the year-round permits for town residents, and we were charging just a fee. We've gotten, I don't know, maybe a handful, few more residents from the town that were complaining that the fee was too high for them. Some people were retired and they would have to go into the city for a few days, and it was just too much money. So we're bringing that permit back just with an increased cost, which we'll fix that by resolution on another meeting. So this will set that law up to allow that permit to come back in. In the meantime, what we've done is we've honored the permits that were issued in the past for the fee that was used in the past. So that's what we've been doing. But I just want to make, and I've made people aware of this, the town residents, they should just be aware. People are very confused about town and village. So, and who pays taxes where. So some of the town residents, it's important that they should be aware that they can park for free at the Amagansett train station. So a lot of people were not aware of that. So it's something that, you know, could save them if they're on a fixed income or a fixed budget and they have to go into the city. They can park in Amagansett train station for free if they're a town resident. So it's just something I wanted to point out because it could save them that much more money by using the Amagansett train station rather than using the East Hampton train station. So just something to point out. It's come up in conversations that I've had with several people that, and they weren't aware of it. So just wanted to.
What is the cost of the long-term parking permit?
It's going to be $400 a year. It was, I think, it was either $250 or $275, which, you know, isn't even close to what it should be. So, but that's going to be a different, I'm not sure when that's on. Is that on in January, Marcos?
January 21st.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. All right. Next.
Notice for a public hearing to be held on January 21st, 2022 at 11 a.m. via video conferencing for introductory number 33-2021, a proposed code amendment to Chapter 278 zoning to amend the prohibition on basement use.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Number 27, approve the formation of a central sewer committee and appoint members. Mayor Larson, Chair, Marcos Baladron, Vincent Messina, Billy Hayjack, Tom Priato, David Collins, and Pio Lombardo.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
And a couple addendums.
Yeah, we got a couple of add-ons. Go ahead, June.
Okay, we amended Resolution 98-2021, accepting the retirement of Police Sergeant Richard Mamay to include and authorize the payment of $186,428.40 for accrued time. And that will be paid from the Employee Benefit Leave Fund out of the January 14th, 2022 payroll.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and
Except-
carried.
Sorry.
Sorry, June, sorry.
That's okay. Accept the donation of 8 picnic tables from Hampton Chutney.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Where are they going to go, Mayor? Or has that not yet been decided?
I believe they're going to go in front of Hampton Chutney on the brick area.
That's correct. That's in accordance with the outdoor dining legislation.
Okay.
Okay, and number 3, approve the hiring of part-time on-call basis snowplow operators at the hourly wage of $42.50 with a 4-hour minimum call-out.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Is that it,
And
June?
that's it.
That's it. All right. So before we adjourn and we're going to be going into executive session. We have to talk about personnel, real estate, and we have some legal issues to speak about. I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and we're not going to have a work session in the beginning of January, so Happy New Year. Hopefully you'll join us at the Polar Plunge at Main Beach. And I think that's it. So we're going to go into executive session. If anything comes up where we have to reopen this meeting, we will, and we'll notify the press. Otherwise, can I get a motion to close this meeting?
Don't
So
move.
move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the meeting is closed. See you in executive session. Thanks, everyone, and Merry Christmas.
You too.
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.